They say the loudest sound in the world isn't an explosion. It's the sound of a pen signing a divorce decree that ends 20 years of loyalty. Harrison Prescott thought he was discarding a boring housewife when he threw Isabella out into the rain to move his 24-year-old mistress into their Malibu estate. He thought he was upgrading. He thought he was the genius behind his billion-dollar tech empire. He was wrong. Dead wrong. By the time he realized that Isabella wasn't just his wife, but the silent owner of the intellectual property that built his company, it was too late. He didn't just lose a wife. He handed the keys to the kingdom to the woman he betrayed. This is the story of how Harrison Prescott lost a billion-dollar queen, and didn't even know it until she destroyed him. The invitation to the charity gala at the Pierre Hotel in New York read, "The Prescott Foundation," printed in gold leaf on heavy cream cardstock. It was the physical manifestation of everything Harrison Prescott valued: appearances, wealth, and the adoration of strangers. Isabella Prescott stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite of their penthouse on Fifth Avenue. At 42, she was striking dark hair, pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon, wearing a vintage emerald Dior gown that had belonged to her grandmother. She didn't look like a woman about to be discarded. She looked like old money. She looked like stability. But Harrison didn't want stability anymore. He wanted excitement. "Are you wearing that?" Isabella turned. Harrison stood in the doorway, adjusting the cufflinks of his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. At 45, he was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jaw, restless eyes, the look of a man who had conquered the tech world with his firm Nexus dynamics and was now looking for new territories to pillage. "It's elegant, Harrison," Isabella said, her voice calm. She was used to the barbs. They had been increasing in frequency over the last 6 months, ever since he hired the new PR consultant for the firm. "The board respects tradition. The board is a group of dinosaurs, Bella, and frankly, so are you sometimes." He walked past her, checking his reflection, preening. "Tiffany will be there tonight. Try to be pleasant. She's spearheading the rebrand." Tiffany. Tiffany Cole. 24 years old, a degree in communications from a party school, and legs that went on for days. She was the PR consultant. She was also the reason Harrison had started coming home at 3 a.m., smelling of Santal 33 and gin. "I am always pleasant, Harrison," Isabella said, picking up her clutch. Inside was a flash drive, a backup of the original source code for Nexus, the code she had written in their cramped apartment in Palo Alto 20 years ago, while Harrison was out charming investors. He had the face, the voice, the sales pitch. But Isabella had the brain. She had the architecture. And legally, though he seemed to have forgotten, she held the patents in a blind trust established by her late father, a paranoid but brilliant corporate attorney named Arthur Rossi. The gala was a blur of flashing lights and forced smiles. Harrison worked the room like a politician, his hand guiding Isabella's lower back with a pressure that felt more like a threat than affection. Then she saw her. Tiffany Cole was wearing a dress that was less a garment and more a cry for attention. Red sequins, backless, dangerously low cut. She wasn't just at the party. She was holding court near the bar, laughing loudly, her hand resting familiarly on the arm of Nexus Dynamics CFO, joyous in her power. When Harrison saw her, he practically vibrated. He left Isabella mid-sentence with the senator of New York to check on the PR strategy. Isabella watched from the shadows of a potted palm. She watched Harrison approach Tiffany. She saw the look not of a boss to an employee, but of a starving man to a feast. She saw his hand graze her waist. She saw Tiffany whisper something in his ear that made him throw his head back and laugh, a youthful, unguarded laugh Isabella hadn't heard in a decade. She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Bennett Aurelia, the company's heavy-hitting external counsel, and one of the few men in New York who knew where the bodies were buried. "He's making a mistake, Bella," Bennett said quietly, swirling his scotch. "He thinks he's invincible, Bennett," she replied, not taking her eyes off her husband. Men like Harrison always do. They confuse luck with genius and support with servitude. Bennett paused. "The papers are ready, if you want to pull the trigger." "Not yet," she whispered. "Let him make the first move. If I leave him, I get half. If he throws me out, if he acts on moral turpitude or tries to cheat me, I get everything." That was the clause Dad put in the prenup, remember? Bennett smirked. "Your father was a vicious bastard. I miss him." The humiliation came 2 hours later. Harrison took the stage to make his speech. He thanked the board, the investors, the staff. He thanked Tiffany Cole for her visionary new direction. He did not thank his wife. He didn't even mention her name. When they got back to the penthouse, the silence was deafening. Harrison poured himself a drink and turned to her. His face flushed with the adrenaline of the night and the liquor. "I want a divorce," he said. No preamble, no hesitation. Isabella carefully took off her earrings, placing them on the vanity. "I know. I'm in love with Tiffany," he continued, emboldened by her lack of reaction. "She understands me. She understands the future of Nexus. Bella, let's be honest. You're stuck in the past. You're a homemaker. You haven't contributed to the business in years." Isabella turned to face him. The audacity took her breath away, even though she expected it. "I haven't contributed Harrison, who stayed up 3 nights in a row to fix the kernel panic before the IPO launch in 2014, who restructured the debt when the Series B funding fell through." "Stop it," he snapped. "You proofread some documents. You gave emotional support. Don't rewrite history to make yourself important. I built this, me." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "My lawyers drafted this. It's generous. You get the Hamptons house a monthly stipend for 5 years, and you keep your jewelry. In exchange, you sign away any claim to Nexus Dynamics and vacate this apartment by tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" Isabella asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're kicking me out of my home in less than 24 hours. Tiffany is moving in on Monday." Harrison said, his eyes cold, devoid of the man she had married. "She wants to redecorate, get rid of all this dusty antique energy." Isabella looked at the papers. It wasn't a settlement. It was an insult. A stipend. For the woman who invented the algorithm that made him a billionaire. "And if I don't sign, then I'll ruin you." Harrison stepped closer, towering over her. "I have the best lawyers in the city. I'll paint you as an unstable, vindictive shrew. I'll make sure you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. Take the deal, Bella. Go retire to the Hamptons and grow tomatoes. It's what you're good at." Isabella looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the grey at his temples she used to die for him. She saw the wrinkles she used to kiss. And she saw a stranger. "Okay," she said softly. Harrison blinked, surprised by the easy victory. "Okay. I'll pack tonight. I'll be gone by morning." She didn't sign the papers, though. He was too drunk on his own ego to notice she just left them on the table. She packed 2 suitcases. She took her clothes, her grandmother's jewelry, and the hard drive from the safe. As she walked out of the penthouse lobby into the cold, biting wind of a New York autumn rain, she didn't cry. She hailed a cab. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. "The Four Seasons," she said. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Bennett, it's Bella." "He did it. He kicked me out." "I'm sorry, Bella." Bennett's voice came through, gruff but warm. "Don't be," she said, watching the rain streak against the window, blurring the city lights. "Execute Protocol Regina. Freeze the assets held in the Rossi Trust, and send the cease and desist regarding the use of the Core X algorithm to Nexus Dynamics, effective immediately. It's going to be a bloodbath, Bella." "I know," she said, her eyes reflecting the passing streetlights like cold steel. "He wanted a younger model. I'm going to show him exactly how expensive an upgrade can be." For the first month, Harrison Prescott felt like a god. With Isabella gone, the penthouse transformed. The antique mahogany furniture was replaced with sleek, uncomfortable Italian leather. The library, once filled with Isabella's first editions and legal texts, was converted into a wellness room for Tiffany, complete with a Peloton and a juice bar. Tiffany was a whirlwind of energy. She threw parties 3 nights a week. Champagne flowed like water. Harrison was the center of attention, the envy of every older executive who wished they had the guts to trade in their 40-something wife for a 20-something model. "You look 10 years younger, Harry," Tiffany cooed one morning, straightening his tie. She called him Harry. Isabella had always hated that nickname, saying it sounded like a frantic child. Tiffany made it sound like a rock star. "I feel 10 years younger," he lied. In reality, he was exhausted. The parties went late. Tiffany had an insatiable need for stimulation. Clubs, dinners, trips to St. Bart's on the corporate jet. He was drinking more, sleeping less, and skipping morning briefings. But the stock was holding steady. The rebrand was flashy. Nexus was cool again. Then came the first tremor. It happened on a Tuesday morning in November. Harrison was nursing a hangover in his glass-walled office when his CTO, a brilliant but anxious man named David Chen, burst in. "We have a problem," David said, bypassing the usual pleasantries. "A big one." "Calm down, David. What is it?" "Server outage." "No. We've been locked out of the Core X repositories." Harrison frowned, rubbing his temples. "What do you mean, locked out?" "We own the servers. We own the hardware, Harrison. We don't own the source code license. I just got a flagged notification from the system. Our license key for the Core X algorithm, the engine that runs our entire data analytics platform, has been revoked." Harrison laughed. "That's a glitch. Call IT." "I did call IT. They can't fix it. The revocation came from the IP holder." "We are the IP holder," Harrison shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. David looked down at his iPad, his face pale. "Actually, we aren't. I looked into the metadata. The license authentication pings a server owned by a holding company called Rossi and Aurelia Ventures." Harrison froze. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rossi. Isabella's maiden name. That's impossible," Harrison stammered. My ex-wife, she doesn't own anything. She signed a prenup." "Harrison, if the Core X engine shuts down, our client data goes dark in 48 hours. Banks, hospitals, logistics firms, they all rely on Nexus. If we go dark, we are looking at billions in lawsuits. We need to get that key back online. Harrison grabbed his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed Isabella's number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He cursed and dialed Bennett Aurelia, his company counsel. Or so he thought. Bennett, fix this. Isabella is playing games with the code. Bennett's voice was calm, almost cheerful. Ah, Harrison, I'm glad you called. I was just about to send over my resignation letter. What? I'm afraid I have a conflict of interest. You see, I represent Rossi and Aurelia Ventures. I always have, since your father-in-law Arthur set it up back in '98. You work for me, Harrison screamed. No, Harrison, I worked for the company, and the company rents its technology from Isabella, always has. You just never bothered to read the technical addendums in the annual reports because you found them boring. Remember? Harrison fell back into his chair, the blood draining from his face. He remembered. Oh, God, he remembered. The late nights Isabella spent with papers spread over the floor. Just sign here, Harrison. It's the IP renewal for the trust. He would sign without looking too busy planning his Forbes cover shoot. Where is she, Bennett? She's unavailable, but she did leave a message. What is it? She said to tell you that she hopes Tiffany is good at coding. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Isabella was sitting in a cafe in Zurich. She wasn't wearing Dior today. She was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit, her hair loose. She looked vibrant. Across from her sat the CEO of Vanguard Tech. Harrison's biggest rival, a Swiss giant named Julian Thorne. Wait, no. I cannot use Julian. Let's use Elias Thorne. Mrs. Prescott. Elias said, his accent thick and precise. Or should I say, Ms. Rossi? Ms. Rossi is fine. She smiled, sipping her espresso. My engineers have reviewed the architecture you sent over. It is exquisite. It is far superior to what Nexus is currently running. You say you wrote this. I wrote the original Core X, Isabella said. And I've spent the last 5 years quietly developing Core Y. It's faster, more secure, and unlike Harrison's version, it doesn't rely on legacy patches. Elias leaned forward. And you want to sell it to Vanguard? No, Isabella said, her eyes hard. I don't want to sell it. I want a partnership. I want to be the chairwoman of the new division. And I want to crush Nexus Dynamics into the dust. Elias Thorne smiled, extending a hand. I think we are going to get along very well, Ms. Rossi. Back in New York, the rain had started again. Harrison stood by the window of his penthouse. Tiffany was in the background, complaining loudly about a caterer who had cancelled on her. Harry, are you listening to me? The caviar won't be here until 7. Harrison stared at his reflection in the glass. He looked tired. He looked old. And for the first time in his life, he looked scared. Shut up, Tiffany, he whispered. Excuse me, she snapped. I said, shut up, he roared, turning on her. The veneer was cracking. The twist had been turned. The Queen had made her move on the board, and the King was standing exposed with nothing but a pawn to protect him. The collapse of Nexus Dynamics didn't happen all at once. It happened in agonizing public slow motion. 72 hours after Isabella initiated protocol, Regina the Nexus servers didn't go dark. They throttled. It was a fail-safe Isabella had coded into the kernel years ago. In the absence of a valid license key, the algorithm would operate at 5% capacity. Just enough to keep the lights on, but not enough to process the massive data streams their clients paid millions for. Wall Street reacted with the brutality of a shark sensing blood in the water. Harrison stood in the center of the trading floor at the Nexus headquarters. The giant screens lining the walls, usually displaying a sea of comforting green numbers, were bleeding red. Down 12 points since opening bell, muttered Caleb, the VP of sales, wiping sweat from his forehead. Goldman Sachs just pulled their advisory contract. They said they can't trust a platform that lags. Harrison, you have to do something. I am doing something, Harrison barked. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. Because he hadn't. His Tom Ford suit was rumpled, his tie loose. I'm suing her. I'm suing the trust. It's economic terrorism. But the legal meeting an hour later was a cold shower of reality. They met in the glass-walled conference room. Tiffany was there, scrolling through Instagram, seemingly bored by the discussion of intellectual property law. Sitting opposite Harrison was his new legal team sharks from Cromwell and Sullivan, costing him $1,000 an hour. It's not good, Mr. Prescott, said the lead attorney, a woman named Beverly Sharp. She lived up to her name. We've reviewed the founding documents of Nexus. The assignment of intellectual property rights is incredibly specific. It's fraud, Harrison shouted. She was my wife. Everything she made belongs to the community property, not if it was developed under the aegis of the Rossi Trust prior to the company's incorporation. Beverly corrected, sliding a document across the table. Your wife didn't just write code, Mr. Prescott. She patented the underlying logic gates under her maiden name 3 years before she married you. Then she leased it to Nexus for a nominal fee of $1 a year. That lease had a clause, termination upon dissolution of marriage or cessation of cohabitation. Harrison stared at the paper. The words swam before his eyes. $1 a year. She had given him everything for free, practically, and he had treated it as his birthright. So pay her. Harrison slammed his fist on the table. Offer her $10,020,000. Get the license back. We tried, Beverly said quietly. We reached out to Bennett Aurelia this morning. And they declined to negotiate. Bennett said Ms. Rossi has entered into an exclusive partnership with a new entity. She is legally barred from licensing the tech to a competitor. A competitor? Harrison laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Who is she working with? Vanguard, Beverly said. The room went silent. Vanguard, led by Elias Davenport, formerly Thorne's rival, was the only company with the infrastructure to rival Nexus, if Isabella gave them the Core X engine. Harrison, Tiffany piped up, looking up from her phone. Why don't we just make a new code? Like, how hard can it be? It's just typing, right? The engineers in the room looked at her with a mix of horror and disdain. It took 10 years to build Core X, Tiffany, Harrison said through gritted teeth. We don't have 10 years. We have 10 days before we're insolvent. Well, don't yell at me, she huffed, standing up. I'm trying to help. I booked you an interview with CNBC for this afternoon. Squawk Box. You need to control the narrative. Tell them Isabella is crazy. Tell them she's bitter. A public interview, Beverly warned. That's risky, Harrison. I can handle it, Harrison said, straightening his tie. He needed to feel powerful again. He needed to charm the world. I'll destroy her reputation. If I can't have the code, I'll make sure no one wants to do business with her. It was the biggest mistake of his life. The interview aired live at 4 p.m. Harrison sat under the hot studio lights, sweating despite the heavy makeup. The anchor, a sharp-witted journalist named Anderson Cooper, a real name to ground the reality, or a fictional equivalent like Andrew Ross, didn't pull punches. Mr. Prescott, the anchor began, reports are circulating that Nexus Dynamics has lost access to its core operating system. Is it true that the intellectual property was never yours? That's a mischaracterization. Harrison smiled, the charm failing to reach his eyes. My ex-wife is currently holding our systems hostage in a domestic dispute. It's a sad attempt to leverage a divorce settlement. It's personal, not professional. But the patent filings are public, the anchor pressed. Isabella Rossi is listed as the sole inventor. And wasn't she the lead engineer during your Series A funding hauls? Isabella, Harrison scoffed. Isabella was a helper. She wrote some early scripts, sure. But the vision, the architecture, that was me. She's a housewife who got lucky with a good lawyer. A housewife? The anchor raised an eyebrow. Because, according to a press release issued 5 minutes ago by Vanguard, Isabella Rossi has just been named their new Chief Innovation Officer, and they've released a benchmark test showing their new system running on her code is 400% faster than yours. Harrison froze on live television. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And, the anchor continued, looking at his tablet, it seems your current PR consultant, Ms. Tiffany Cole, just tweeted. Let me read this. Harrison is going to crush his crazy ex. Old women need to know when to retire. Do you endorse this statement, Mr. Prescott? Is this the official stance of Nexus Dynamics? The feed cut to a commercial, but the damage was done. Harrison Prescott hadn't just lost the narrative. He had confirmed to the world that he was a misogynist who underestimated his greatest asset. When he got back to the penthouse, the locks had been changed, not by Isabella, by the landlord. The company credit card on file for the rent had been declined. Harrison sat on the curb of Fifth Avenue, the rain soaking his suit. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. This is too much drama for me. I'm going to stay at my mom's. Don't call me. He was alone. And for the first time, the silence of the city didn't sound like opportunity. It sounded like a gavel coming down. 6 months later. The tech world had a short memory for failures, but a long memory for grudges. Harrison Prescott was yesterday's news, a cautionary tale taught in MBA classes under the module Asset Management and Spousal Risk. Isabella Rossi, however, was the moment. The launch event for Vanguard's new AI platform, the Rossi Engine, was held in Silicon Valley at the Steve Jobs Theater. It was the kind of event usually reserved for a new iPhone. Isabella stood backstage, smoothing the lapel of her white Alexander McQueen power suit. She looked radiant. The stress lines that had defined her last years with Harrison were gone, replaced by the glow of purpose. You ready, boss? Isabella turned. David Chen, the former CTO of Nexus, smiled at her. He had resigned from Nexus 3 days after Harrison's disastrous interview. He wasn't the only one. Isabella had hired back almost her entire original engineering team. They had walked out on Harrison to follow the person they knew was the real genius. I'm ready, David, she said. How's the demo looking? Flawless. We're running live data from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. 0 latency. Good. Let's go make history. Isabella walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. She didn't need flashy lights or hype men. She just spoke. She spoke about efficiency, about security, and about the future of data. She commanded the room not with volume, but with competence. In the back row of the auditorium, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a cheap windbreaker, sat Harrison Prescott. He barely recognized the woman on stage. Was this the woman he had yelled at for buying the wrong brand of sparkling water? Was this the woman he had called boring? She was electric. She was powerful. She was beautiful in a way that Tiffany's vacuous youth could never touch. He looked down at his phone. He had $12 in his checking account. Nexus had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 2 months ago. The assets, mostly office furniture and leased servers, were being auctioned off next week. He was living in a studio apartment in Queens, driving an Uber to make ends meet, while the lawsuits from shareholders dragged on. He watched Isabella finish her presentation. Technology is not just about code, she told the audience, her voice ringing clear. It's about integrity. It's about knowing the value of the foundation you build on. You cannot build a skyscraper on a lie. The crowd erupted. Harrison slipped out the back exit before the lights came up. He couldn't bear for her to see him. Not like this. He walked to the parking lot, the California sun feeling mocking and bright. He unlocked his used Honda Civic and sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an old, battered moleskin notebook. He had found it in a box of stuff Isabella had left behind in the Hamptons house, the one property she allowed him to sell to pay his initial legal fees, a final act of pity. It was her journal from 2004, the year they started the company. He opened it to a random page. October 14th, 2004. Harrison is so stressed about the pitch to Sequoia. I told him not to worry. I stayed up all night rewriting the compression algorithm so the demo will load faster on their terrible Wi-Fi. I didn't tell him I did it. He needs to feel like he won. He needs to feel like the hero. I love him enough to stay in the shadows if it makes him shine. Harrison read the entry, then read it again. Tears blurred his vision, dropping onto the paper, smearing the ink of the woman who had loved him more than he had ever deserved. I didn't tell him I did it. She had been saving him from the beginning. She had been the wind beneath his wings, and he had cut her down because he thought he was flying on his own. His phone buzzed. A notification from the Uber driver app. Pick up at 1 Infinite Loop. Destination SFO Airport. He wiped his eyes. He had to work. He drove to the pickup point. A woman in a sharp suit was waiting, talking on her phone. He pulled up. It was Beverly Sharp, his former lawyer. She opened the back door and slid in. Airport, please, and step on it. She didn't look at the driver. She was too busy on a call. Yes, Bennett, I know, she was saying into her AirPods. I just left the keynote. Isabella was phenomenal. The stock is going to triple by morning. Oh, and about Harrison. No idea. Last I heard, he was trying to dodge a subpoena from the SEC. Sad, really. He had $1 billion queen, and he traded her for a handful of magic beans. Harrison stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the road, praying she wouldn't recognize the back of his head. He chose his mistress. Beverly laughed cruelly. And now he's paying the bill. Harrison merged onto the highway. The billboard overhead displayed a massive image of Isabella looking over the valley like a titan. The tagline read, "Vanguard, the future is female." He drove in silence, the ghost of his past riding in the back seat, narrating his demise. Queens, New York is a different planet from the penthouse at Fifth Avenue. For Harrison Prescott, it was a purgatory of peeling paint and the smell of stale curry from the restaurant downstairs. It had been 8 months since the fall of Nexus Dynamics. Harrison had sold the Honda Civic to pay off a lingering tax lien. Now he worked the night shift stocking shelves at a Home Depot in Flushing. It was humbling work, the kind that left his back aching and his hands rough hands that used to sign million-dollar checks without a tremor. He was sitting on his futon, eating instant noodles and watching CNN, when a knock came at the door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor. It was the sharp, authoritative rap of someone who didn't belong in this building. Harrison opened the door. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, flanked by 2 private security guards, who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast, was Tiffany Cole. She didn't look like the panicked girl who had fled the penthouse. She looked sharper, harder. She was wearing a trench coat that Harrison recognized Burberry straight off the runway, and her blonde hair was cut in a severe, asymmetrical bob. "Hello, Harry," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "Nice place. Very rustic." "What do you want, Tiffany?" Harrison asked, his voice hoarse. He didn't invite her in. "I'm here to offer you a lifeline," she said, pushing past him into the cramped studio apartment. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of the noodles. God, look at you. The great Harrison Prescott reduced to this. It's tragic, really. "Get out," Harrison said, though he lacked the authority he once had. "Don't be hasty," Tiffany said, pulling a pristine white envelope from her bag. She tossed it onto the futon. "I have a business proposition, one that could get you back in a penthouse by Christmas." Harrison looked at the envelope, then at her. "I don't have any business. I'm bankrupt, Tiffany. You know that. You helped spend the last of it." "You don't have money," Tiffany corrected, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "But you have history, and history is valuable." She began to pace the small room. "I've been seeing someone. A man named Gavin Aurelia. No relation to your old lawyer, thank God. Gavin is a venture capitalist. Specifically, he's a shark who buys distressed assets and sues for sport." "Good for you," Harrison muttered. "Gavin and I have been looking into the original IP filings for Core X." Tiffany continued. "Isabella was smart, I'll give her that. But she made a mistake. Back in 2004, before the trust was finalized, there was a 3-week window where you two were working on the code together in that garage in Palo Alto. No prenup, no trust, just 2 partners." Harrison frowned. So. Tiffany leaned in close, the scent of expensive perfume filling his nostrils sickeningly sweet. "If you were to sign an affidavit stating that you wrote the foundational lines of code during those 3 weeks and that Isabella merely transcribed them, well, that would make the Core X algorithm community property. It would mean she stole it when she transferred it to the Rossi Trust." Harrison stared at her. "That's a lie. You know it's a lie. I couldn't write a line of code if my life depended on it." "Does it matter?" Tiffany laughed. "It's a he said, she said. But with Gavin's lawyers, we can tie Isabella up in court for years. We can freeze Vanguard's assets. We can tank her stock price. And to make the lawsuit go away, she'll settle. Gavin estimates a settlement of $100 million. She pointed a manicured finger at his chest. "Your cut would be 10%. $50 million, Harry. You could be a king again." Harrison looked at the envelope. $50 million. It was freedom. It was his dignity back. It was a way to punish the woman who was currently on every magazine cover in the world, while he rotted in Queens. "All I have to do is lie," Harrison asked quietly. "All you have to do is sign." Tiffany smiled. "We have the affidavit drafted. We even have witnesses lined up who remember seeing you working on the code. It's a slam dunk." Harrison picked up the envelope. He opened it and read the document. It was a masterpiece of fiction, painting him as the tragic genius and Isabella as the conniving thief. "I need a day to think about it," Harrison said. Tiffany's smile faltered slightly. "Don't take too long, Harry. The offer expires tomorrow at noon. I'll send a car. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the linoleum. At the door, she paused. Don't be stupid, Harrison. You chose me once because I was the fun option. Choose me now, because I'm the winning option. Isabella is the past. We are the future. The door clicked shut. Harrison stood in the silence. He looked at the document. Then he looked at the pile of unpaid bills on his counter. He felt a wave of nausea. He walked over to his closet, a cardboard box in the corner, and dug to the bottom. He pulled out the black moleskin notebook he had saved from the Hamptons. Isabella's journal. He opened it to the entry dated November 2004. Harrison brought me coffee at 4 a.m. again. He doesn't understand what I'm typing, but he stays up with me just to keep me company. He's my rock. I'm going to name the variable sets after his favorite constellations. Orion, Cassiopeia, so that even inside the machine he's part of it. Harrison read the words, and for the first time in years, the fog of his own narcissism fully lifted. He wasn't the victim. He never had been. He was the villain in the story of a woman who had loved him unconditionally. And now Tiffany wanted him to be the villain one last time. He looked at the clock. It was 9:00 p.m. He grabbed his coat. He didn't call the car, Tiffany promised. He grabbed the journal, the affidavit, and his last $20. He had to get to Hudson Yards. He had to get to Vanguard. The headquarters of Vanguard Tech was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Hudson River. It was late, but the lights on the top floor were still blazing. Isabella Rossi didn't work 9 to 5. She worked until the job was done. Isabella was in the middle of a strategy meeting with Elias Davenport and her legal team when her assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, interrupted. "Ms. Rossi, I'm so sorry," Leo said, looking flustered. "Security is on the line from the lobby. There's a man down there demanding to see you. He says it's urgent legal business regarding a hostile takeover." Isabella rubbed her temples. "Who is it? A process server?" "No, ma'am. He says his name is Harrison Prescott." The room went silent. Elias looked at Isabella, his expression unreadable. "Shall I have him removed?" Isabella hesitated. She hadn't seen Harrison since the day she walked out of the penthouse. She had seen the photos in the tabloids, Harrison looking disheveled, Harrison yelling at paparazzi. She thought she would feel satisfaction, but mostly she just felt a dull ache for the wasted years. "No," Isabella said, standing up. "Let him up. But bring security." 5 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Harrison stepped out. He looked older than she remembered, thinner. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He stood awkwardly in the plush modern lobby of the executive suite, holding a battered notebook and a crumpled envelope. Isabella walked out to meet him, stopping 10 feet away. 2 large security guards stood just behind her. "Harrison," she said. Her voice was cool, detached. "You have 5 minutes. If this is about money, you're wasting your time." Harrison looked at her. She looked magnificent, powerful, untouchable. "It's not about money, Bella," he said, using the name he had lost the right to use. "Then what?" He stepped forward and the guards tensed. He held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to warn you." He held out the envelope. "Tiffany Cole came to see me tonight. She's with Gavin Aurelia now." Isabella's eyes narrowed. Gavin Aurelia was a notorious corporate raider. "And they're filing a lawsuit tomorrow morning," Harrison said, his voice steady. "They want me to sign an affidavit claiming I wrote the source code for Core X in 2004, They want to invalidate the trust and claim 50% ownership of your IP. Isabella let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's absurd. No court would believe you wrote that code. You don't even know Java from Python. Well, they don't need the court to believe it forever, Harrison said. They just need enough doubt to get an injunction. They want to freeze your assets and force a settlement. They offered me $50 million to sign this. Isabella looked at the envelope in his hand. Then she looked at his face. She saw the desperation there, but also something else. Regret. "And did you sign it?" she asked softly. "No." Harrison reached into his pocket and pulled out the black moleskin notebook. "I brought you this instead." Isabella froze. She recognized it instantly. It was her lab notebook from the garage days, the one she thought she had lost in the move. "This proves everything," Harrison said, his voice cracking. "It has your handwriting. It has the dates. It has the notes about the constellations." He choked on the word. "It proves I didn't write a damn thing. It proves I was just the guy bringing you coffee." He walked forward and placed the notebook and the unsigned affidavit on the marble reception desk. "Why?" Isabella asked, watching him. "Why give up $50 million? You're broke, Harrison. I know you are." Harrison laughed a sad, broken sound. "Because I already sold the most valuable thing I ever had. Bella, I sold us for a midlife crisis and a rebranding strategy. I'm not going to sell your legacy, too." He backed away toward the elevator. "Tiffany is going to be angry," Harrison said. "She might try to leak things, personal things. But without my signature, her lawsuit is dead in the water." "Harrison," Isabella called out as he pressed the elevator button. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't forgiveness. It was too soon for that. But it was an acknowledgement. "You were always the queen, Bella." Harrison whispered to the metal doors. "I was just the jester who thought he was wearing a crown." The doors opened, and he stepped inside. As Harrison descended 40 floors, he expected to feel a sense of loss. He had just walked away from $50 million. But as he walked out of the building into the cool night air of Hudson Yards, he realized he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. He felt clean. But the story wasn't over. Tiffany Cole was not a woman who took rejection lightly, and Gavin Aurelia was not a man who liked to lose money. As Harrison walked toward the subway station, a black SUV pulled up alongside him. The window rolled down. It wasn't Tiffany. It was a man Harrison recognized from the business pages. Gavin Aurelia. "Mr. Prescott," Gavin said, his voice smooth like oiled silk. "Tiffany tells me you're having a crisis of conscience. That's very noble, very quaint." Harrison kept walking. "I'm not signing Gavin. Find another patsy." The SUV kept pace with him. "Oh, I don't need you to sign any more, Harrison. You see, Tiffany has a backup plan, and unfortunately for you, it involves the police." Harrison stopped. "What are you talking about? Embezzlement?" Gavin smiled. "During your time at Nexus, Tiffany has been reviewing the old books. It seems she found a series of wire transfers authorized by your login credentials to offshore accounts. Fake, of course, but very convincing. Unless what?" Harrison demanded. "Unless you go back up there." Gavin pointed to the glowing tower of Vanguard, "and you retrieve that notebook, and you bring it to me, tonight." Harrison looked at the tower. He looked at the SUV. The trap had snapped shut. He had tried to be the hero, but the past was a sticky web. "I can't go back up there," Harrison said. Then you're going to jail, Harrison, Gavin said cheerfully. And I suspect you won't last long in Rikers Island. Harrison stood on the corner of 34th Street. He had a choice: save himself by betraying Isabella one more time, stealing the only proof of her genius, or accept the fall. Go to prison for a crime he didn't commit and protect the Queen. He looked at the tower one last time. Then he turned to Gavin. "Call the police," Harrison said. Gavin blinked. "Excuse me." "I said, call the police," Harrison said, his voice loud, attracting the attention of passers-by. "Because I'm not going back in there. And if you think I'm afraid of prison after living with the guilt of what I did to her, you're wrong." Harrison pulled out his phone, a cracked Android, and dialed 911 himself. "Yes," he said into the phone, staring Gavin Aurelia in the eye. "I'd like to report an attempted blackmail." The sirens wailing down 34th Street sounded like a symphony of judgment. Gavin Aurelia didn't stick around. As soon as he realized Harrison was actually on the line with emergency services, the black SUV peeled away. Tires screeching against the asphalt, disappearing into the labyrinth of Manhattan traffic. But the damage was done. Harrison remained on the corner phone in hand, waiting. When the NYPD cruiser pulled up, Harrison didn't run. He raised his hands. "I'm the one who called," he told the officers, "and there's a warrant that's about to be manufactured against me. I want to go on the record now." The next 12 hours were a blur of fluorescent lights, cold metal tables, and the bitter taste of stale coffee in a holding cell. Harrison was processed. The story of the embezzlement, which Gavin had threatened to plant, hadn't hit the system yet, but Harrison knew it was coming. Men like Gavin Aurelia didn't make idle threats. They had accountants who could rewrite history in a keystroke. By morning, the charges appeared. Nexus Dynamics auditors, suspiciously hired just hours prior, flagged irregularities in the Cayman accounts linked to Harrison's credentials. It was a frame job, elegant and lethal. Harrison sat in the interrogation room, facing a weary detective. He had no lawyer. He had no money for bail. He had resigned himself to the fact that his redemption would be a silent one, served out in a state penitentiary. Then the door opened. It wasn't a public defender. It was Bennett Aurelia, the man who had once been Harrison's corporate counsel and now served the Queen. "Bennett." Harrison blinked, his eyes gritty from lack of sleep. "I can't afford you." "You're not paying me," Bennett said, dropping a thick file onto the metal table. He looked at the detective. "Detective, my client is free to go. We have provided the district attorney with the exculpatory evidence." The detective looked at the file, then at Bennett. "The DA signed off on this 10 minutes ago. You're holding an innocent man based on falsified data packets uploaded at 10:45 p.m. last night by a server located in a penthouse owned by Mr. Gavin Aurelia. We traced the IP packets. We also have the audio recording of Mr. Aurelia attempting to blackmail Mr. Prescott." Harrison looked at Bennett, stunned. How did you get the audio?" Bennett tapped his own ear. "You called 911, Harrison. But before that, you were in the lobby of Vanguard. Security protocols are tight. Our directional microphones picked up your conversation on the street corner. Isabella watches everything." Isabella. Harrison felt a lump form in his throat. "Is she here?" "No," Bennett said, his voice softening slightly. "She's at the stock exchange. She's ringing the opening bell. Vanguard just acquired the assets of Nexus Dynamics for pennies on the dollar." Bennett stood up. "Come on, Harrison. Let's get you out of here." They walked out of the precinct into the blinding morning sun. A black town car was waiting. "Where are we going?" Harrison asked. "I'm going to the office," Bennett said. "You are going wherever you want. But Isabella wanted you to have this." Bennett handed him a plain white envelope. Harrison opened it. Inside was a cashier's check. It wasn't for $50 million. It wasn't for $1 billion. It was for $250,000. And there was a note handwritten in that familiar, elegant script. "Harrison, this is the seed money you used to start Nexus in 2004. It was your savings. You put it all on the line once for a dream. Take it and build something real this time. Something that belongs to you. The journal is safe. The seed is safe. Don't look back." Bella Harrison stared at the check. It was a fortune to him now. But more than that, it was a clean slate. She hadn't given him charity. She had given him a refund on his initial investment in their life together. She was returning his stake, severing the last financial tie, and setting him free. "Thank her for me," Harrison whispered. "I will," Bennett said. He opened the car door. Oh, and Harrison Tiffany Cole was arrested an hour ago at JFK. She was trying to board a flight to Dubai with a bag full of stolen corporate hard drives. Gavin Aurelia is currently negotiating a surrender. You don't have to worry about them anymore. Harrison watched the town car drive away. He stood on the sidewalk, holding the check that represented his past and his future. He didn't buy a penthouse. He didn't buy a suit. Harrison Prescott moved to a small coastal town in Maine. He bought a rundown hardware store that was about to go out of business. He fixed it up himself, sanding the floors, painting the walls, learning the inventory. He worked with his hands. He talked to locals who didn't know who he was and didn't care about algorithms or IPOs. They just wanted to know which primer was best for a deck. 3 years later. It was a snowy evening. Harrison was locking up the shop, flipping the sign to closed. He walked into the back office, shaking the snow off his coat. On the small TV in the corner, the news was playing. And in business news, tech mogul Isabella Rossi has been named Time magazine's Person of the Year. Her company Vanguard Nexus has just pledged $1 billion to global education initiatives. When asked about her success, Ms. Rossi said she learned the hard way that loyalty is the only currency that matters. The camera zoomed in on Isabella. She was older now, lines of wisdom etched around her eyes, silver streaking her dark hair. She looked formidable. She looked happy. Harrison smiled. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small framed photo. It wasn't of him and Isabella at a gala or on a yacht. It was a Polaroid from 2004. 2 kids in a garage eating pizza over a mess of cables, exhausted but smiling. He looked at the photo, then up at the screen. "Long live the Queen," he whispered. He turned off the TV, grabbed his keys, and walked out into the cold, clean night air. He had lost $1 billion, but for the first time in his life he wasn't poor. He was free. Harrison Prescott's story is a brutal reminder that in the game of life you never truly know the value of what you hold until you let it go. He thought he was the player, but he was just a piece on the board. He chased the glitter of a mistress and the ego of a CEO title, only to realize that the real power, the brilliance, the loyalty, and the foundation of his success was the wife he left behind. In the end, Isabella didn't just win the company. She won her dignity. And Harrison? He found redemption not in getting his billions back, but in finding the humility he lost along the way. It's a lesson for all of us. Cherish those who build with you in the dark, because they are the only ones who will truly shine with you in the light. If this story hit home for you, if you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed, hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama, a twist, or a lesson in karma. What would you have done if you were Isabella? Would you have given him the money or left him with nothing? Let me know in the comments below. See you in the next story.